afternoon, everyone. As indicated, I'm Lawrence Hammond, Director of the Access Initiative here at CPC. Access is a multi-million-dollar initiative that was created by CPC that provides financial resources, capacity building opportunities, and technical assistance to entrepreneurs of color who have historically faced barriers to entry in the real estate development market. Our goal has been to promote and enable greater racial diversity, equity, and inclusion in the real estate industry, which has historically been underrepresented, with less than 1% comprised of Black and brown developers. I'm proud of CPC's focus on closing the racial wealth gap as one of the organization's three main impact goals. We are working to bring diversity to the real estate development industry, and by doing so, creating opportunities for entrepreneurs of color to build their businesses and give back to their communities. Access has been intentionally focused on providing access to both human and financial capital resources, utilizing 4 pillars of education, advocacy, innovation, and investment. We have successfully educated 170 plus entrepreneurs through our incubator training series, which many are in attendance today, which has afforded many the opportunity to utilize both debt and equity products for their development projects. Access has also been instrumental in being an advocate for policy decisions through active engagement with our city and state governmental funding partners. You see, it's through these efforts that Access has fostered the creation of the New York State's Legacy City Access Program in partnerships with land banks and cities throughout New York State. Additionally, Access serves now as the facility manager for a $50 million MBE guarantee facility that was created by HPD and Goldman Sachs. This facility is supporting BIPOC developers in providing guarantees required to secure construction financing to develop affordable housing projects. As someone who has been laser focused on this work, I was also glad to see several interesting approaches to advancing racial equity among the innovative ideals for the future of housing ideas that were received. Among both renters and homeowners, Black households are significantly more cost burdened than white households. More than 30% of household income goes to housing costs. Families face hard choices regarding expenses that contribute to well-being, from health care to education and child care costs. As we reimagine the future of housing and think about how we can devote our time and talents to addressing the racial wealth gap, it's clear that we need to bring a variety of solutions to bear. Home ownership is one theme that rises to the top and is something that you're going to hear more about later in these sessions. Whether paying a mortgage or paying rent, the ability to afford a stable home is the foundation for American ideals like advancing a career, starting a family, or even building a business. However, another opportunity to address the racial wealth gap, as I mentioned when I described CPC's Access Initiative, is empowering BIPOC developers to succeed in the real estate industry. And that's something that we will hear about shortly. The speakers in our next session will take us through different models for making affordable housing more accessible and other approaches to build wealth and fostering economic opportunity with a focus on communities of color. Some of these approaches are already being implemented in the marketplace with positive results, while others are ready to be tested. I'm looking forward now to an interesting conversation following these presentations. Please, as always, remember to write down your questions for those speakers as they come to you, and we will get to those at the end of this session. With this in mind, I'm pleased to introduce our next panel of speakers. Our first panelist will be Ed Briscoe, who is founder and CEO of Weave Finance. He will be speaking about this tenant equity vehicle ideal, which focuses on wealth creation through a profit-sharing model for rental tenants. Following him will be Taiisa Kelly, Chief Executive Officer of Monarch Housing Associates, who will be presenting her empowering BIPOC real estate developers' ideals, which focuses on addressing the structural inequities of developers of color commonly faced in the affordable housing field. And finally, our last speaker will be Daphany Rose Sanchez, an executive director of KC3, who will tell us about her open source data for equitable transition to sustainable housing ideals. This creates an equitable means for environmental and racial justice. I would also say that Daphany is a proud graduate of our CPC Access Initiative or Access Incubator Training Series. And so now we will have our first speaker. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ed Briscoe. I grew up on the upper middle class, 99% white side of Huntsville, Alabama. Huntsville is known as the Rocket City due to the large presence of NASA there. And it's where the Saturn rockets, the space shuttle rocket boosters, solid rocket boosters, and the Patriot missiles were all designed and built. Growing up there, I ended up with two broad assumptions about life when I was a teenager. The first one was that Americans all have the same opportunity to live in a decent home and get a good education and pursue the career they wanted. The second is that there is no problem that can't be solved if smart, mission-driven people are given the resources to do it. When I took a volunteer trip to New Orleans, that first assumption fell apart. I remember being in the courtyard of a public housing project in a Central City neighborhood, and I could see the Hyatt Hotel sign above the crumbling buildings in the housing project. And that disparity between wealth and poverty was stark. And my only thought was, this is America? It didn't seem like the way it was supposed to be. So over the past 30 plus years since then, I've been on a journey through commercial banking, investment banking, and entrepreneurship to try to help foster a vision for a more shared prosperity. And that's why in 2021, Abby Murray and I co-founded the Colorado Housing Accelerator Initiative, or we call it CHI for short. And we provide custom designed funding for middle-income housing across the state, while helping foster a more shared prosperity between the tenants and the investors in the buildings they live in. So core to that mission is beyond simply just helping the projects work financially, is that what we call the Tenant Equity Vehicle, or TEV. We'd explored a lot of options on how to share profits, ranging from individual development accounts to blockchain. But our primary goals would be cost efficient, empowering, easy to understand, and informed by behavioral economics. So true equity ownership didn't meet those goals due to the legal and functional complexity. So we developed what we see as a proxy for equity ownership, and that's through profit sharing. So as the owners and managers of the debt fund, we cap our profit margin on our loan portfolio, with the remainder of the profits going to the tenants. And then likewise in our private equity fund, our LPs have capped their profits. And over that threshold, they'll share 50% or 100% of the returns with the tenants and the properties in our portfolio. So the tenants benefit from a diversified portfolio of housing, just as the investors do. So to deliver those returns to the tenants, we work with a fintech partner called Stake, and they provide monthly cash back to the tenants based on the rent they've paid. So tenants have a much stronger behavioral response to this monthly cash back that they get news of and they can see in their account compared to an upfront or a back-ended benefit. So just like a 401k, the best way to save is for that money not to go into your checking account. So this is a passive saving mechanism that develops that habit of saving. And we also provide credit reporting based on those payments. Earlier this year, one of our tenants who lives in one of our properties in Grand Junction was on her way back from Denver. It's about a 4-hour drive, and she was in Breckenridge and was running out of gas, and she had no money in her checking account. But she remembered her TEV account, and she was able to move money from that account into her checking account and pay for her gas. to get rid of all the stress and fear revolved around that. So that's our first goal, is to reduce that stress in our tenants' lives. So 20% of Americans have no savings at all. 37% can't handle a $400 unexpected expense. So that's why we have the TEV, is to help them have that emergency fund, hopefully within a year, so based just simply on something the tenants are already doing each month. And in 2025, we're launching financial coaching and debt counseling alongside the TEV to see where we can also help them build that habit of savings. And as their savings grow and their credit scores improve, we can begin to customize that messaging and teaching. So I still believe that there's no problem that can't be solved if mission-driven and smart people are given the resources to do it. So in Colorado, we're building an ecosystem where public, private, and philanthropic funders are all coming together to provide affordable housing and the opportunity to build wealth. So this year, our state government launched the funding programs that are modeled after our funds in both debt and equity, with a tenant equity vehicles similar to ours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, this is much louder than I thought. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Taiisa Kelly. I'm CEO at Monarch Housing Associates. Monarch is a nonprofit organization in New Jersey that is committed to ensuring that every person has access to safe, stable, decent, affordable, and supportive housing that fosters freedom and independence. At Monarch, we really do believe that housing is a human right. So we do work to ensure that we can create that opportunity for every person in New Jersey in whatever way we can. So as an agency, we do this through three primary areas. One, we work with developers to help create affordable and supportive housing throughout the state. Two, we work with communities to help develop and implement plans to end homelessness. And three, we work on policies and regulations to ensure that we are actually creating the resources and the program rules and policies that make it possible to create the housing that we need and address homelessness within the state. So just as a little bit of context about New Jersey, New Jersey is one of the most diverse states in the country. Yet in 2024, our state government released a report that was commissioned to study contracting in the state, our disparity study, as we call it. What that report found was that about 28% of contractors in the state, or registered contractors in the state, are classified as minority-owned businesses, or MBEs. Only about 3.7% of state contracts go to those MBEs, representing only about 1.5% of the total state funding that is issued for contracts, for construction contracting. Professional services represent about 34% of contractors in the state are MBE professional service contractors, and they receive about 10% of state contracts for professional services, representing only about 9.5% of the actual funding that's allocated for professional services in the state. So while we're doing great in terms of having a very diverse state and all that comes with that diversity, we're not doing as well when it comes to the opportunity and the equity of opportunity available. So, we're trying to figure out how do we help break this up. Coming from the perspective that we're working from, we're talking about housing and homelessness, and for our agency, we said, how do we create more diversity in the space and in the ecosystem of affordable housing development? In New Jersey, the LIHTC program is one of the largest programs that's used to actually fund affordable housing. And of the 53 developers that have been awarded LIHTC funding in the last 20 years, only 3 of them were MBEs, were Black and brown businesses. And the first Black woman to receive LIHTC funding received that funding in 2022. So there's a lot of work that we have to do in New Jersey. Now, a BIPOC Developers Collaborative is not in and of itself an innovation, but what we're hoping to do is to be impactful in this process. And so what we're looking at is really trying to investigate the whole ecosystem of helping developers of color to be successful in the affordable housing space. And a couple of things that we've realized. One, affordable housing is a no-brainer. There's not a question about investing and the impact of investing in affordable housing. The question is about the investment in the company. What companies are we choosing to invest in? And so if you are choosing to invest in companies that are willing to do the work of creating affordable housing, and if you're willing to put the resources in, those companies can be successful. And so what choice are we making about who and how we're investing our resources to support affordable housing development? And so we have to be willing to invest deeply. We have to be willing to provide the support because those companies can be successful because there's a space in the affordable housing marketplace where we are going to have, unfortunately, I won't say endless, but a lot of work to be done. So we like to think about the work that has to be done around supporting BIPOC developers in 3 categories. One is capacity building. But when I say capacity building, I'm not just talking about training. Training is important, but it's not just about training. It's about supporting those businesses as small businesses. It's about helping them to understand how to grow their business. It's about investing and providing resources for the staffing necessary to do the work well, to have the experts in-house in addition to the founders, to help them support the growth of their organizations. Unfortunately, a lot of the work that comes up, a lot of the programs that come up around capacity building focus on the training only, but are not looking at the other pieces that businesses need to grow and thrive. So we've been doing some work to really figure out how we can get some financing in the organizational development of BIPOC developers. The second area that folks need resources in is access to capital. This is an age-old question, I think something that everybody recognizes. And I think that what we are starting to really look at is it's not enough to just say you're creating a program that has a set-aside, but we have to start to rethink our underwriting standards. We have to start to rethink the ways that we assess risk and the ways that we think about whether or not these organizations and these project developments can be successful. The other piece that I will just add into there that we're seeing a lot, especially in New Jersey, is that we have to start to invest in the early stage financing for projects. This is the feasibility money. This is the money that is needed to just say that you have a valid project that will be successful. And there's not a lot of spaces where that is the primary focus of funding because that is the funding that is most at risk. But if we can start to pull together resources to make that happen, more emerging developers, more BIPOC developers can get into the path of actually creating affordable housing. And the last piece that we really focus on is in the affordable housing development space, as in most business, it is about relationships. So we have to be creating the spaces and the opportunities for folks to network, to build relationships, to be able to build the partnerships that are necessary to help them move their projects forward successfully in a timely fashion. So we're tackling all of these things in partnership, and our collaborative, what we are trying to do is really make sure that we're building a collaborative that is not only inclusive of the developers, but inclusive of CDFIs, of banks, of our state partners that actually finance affordable housing. Having all of these partners at the table talking about what the solutions are and figuring out how we can create an ecosystem that supports developers of color so that they can be successful and creates a pathway for any emerging developer to successfully enter the space and be part of the solutions. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Oh, y'all are dead. Good afternoon. All right, good afternoon. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Daphany Sanchez. I am the ED at KC3. I'm a native New Yorker, so I know y'all have been sitting down, and so I love to hear that people are alive and well and breathing. I'm coming to you today from my native New Yorker lens. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I grew up in Cooper Park Houses, which is a quiet NYCHA development in Greenpoint, New York. My father grew up in Marcy Houses, which is a couple of streets over in Bed-Stuy. And my grandmother has been in Taylor White's projects. So for me, when I talk about community engagement, I talk about energy efficiency and a just transition, I always go back to where I come from. My family, I was born in the 90s, so I am a millennial. I was born in 1992, and my parents in 1994 were illegally evicted from their NYCHA apartment. And my parents spent a very cold winter in the shelter. And I remember, well, I don't remember, my mom tells me the stories, right? So not 3-year-old memory, that would be amazing. I remember when she told me that there was a person that told her, you know what, you should just come into the shelter and say that you're not with your husband. Because chances are you're most likely to get an apartment if you're a single mom than you're a family. And that tore my mother apart. She was a young mom. She had me at the age of 19. She says 20, and I'm like, Mom, I know how to do math. And she's like, absolutely not. You know, my husband and I and my daughter were one unit. We went through this together. We're gonna come out of this together. And she was in tears, going to CUNY Medgar Evers, working, having a crying baby, and trying to figure out how to navigate this very cold winter. And my father was working at Coca-Cola factory, UPS, and going to CUNY Brooklyn, and also being in the shelter, adhering to the strict 9 p.m. rule. And if you're not in a shelter by 9 p.m., you get kicked out and you have to start the process all over again. We got really lucky because my mom one day found the flyer, and in this flyer, it was from St. Nick's Alliance, and it said, hey, you know, we'll help you find housing. She's like, I'm gonna skip work, potentially lose my job, go figure out if I can get housing, and then, you know, I'll have one less thing to worry about. So she skipped work. She actually left college. She dropped out, and she take these classes over and over again, and she was able to get into Cooper Park Houses, which is where I grew up. And I share this with you all today because I think to myself, damn, that's crazy. Like, my parents went through the craziest situation just so that I can have a roof over my head, they can have a roof over their head. And if it wasn't for this silly flyer from St. Nick's Alliance, like, who knows? We could have still been in the shelter system. We could have probably had to move out of New York. My parents would have had to forcibly split up because that was the recommendation in the early 90s to get a home really fast. And I think about St. Nick's Alliance and like the person that was probably out there putting this flyer up and saying, man, like, it's cold, why am I putting this flyer up? And it just happens to be a miracle. I see St. Nick's today, and I have the pleasure of working with them, and all of their staff is always overwhelmed. They have this big mission to preserve housing, to support community, and I often think to myself, like, these are the leaders of our neighborhoods. These are the leaders that are supporting us, and St. Nick's is not the only one. There's UHAB, there's WEAC, there's ANHD. Like, these are organizations that are built from community, for community, by community. And I get very frustrated when I talk about the clean energy transition, and often our local leaders are not front and center in the room. In the United States, it's a crazy phenomena where most nonprofits are supporting 10% of the workforce, which is more than construction, manufacturing, and finance. And over 1 million nonprofits in the entire United States operate with a budget capacity of $50,000 a year. So they are trying to solve all the problems. They're trying to solve housing injustice, climate justice, racial justice, economic justice with a penny. So my work at KC3 has really thought about, and we're moving forward, this intersection of climate, equity, and housing. As a native New Yorker and as someone that was born and raised in public housing and have family that's still in public housing and still in Section 8, and in low-income co-ops, I think to myself, what can we do to make sure that my family doesn't have to go through the same situations that my parents went through? I never want somebody to be kicked out illegally. I never want somebody to have to choose between working and a house over their roof. And I never want somebody to worry because it's so hot in the wintertime or it's freezing cold, there's no in between. And with this, we started working in 2017 with some of these nonprofits, with Neighborhood Housing Service of Queens, UHAB, NHD, Staten Island, and we're like, okay guys, hear me out. What if you guys start doing energy efficiency work? They all were like, girl, we got way too much work, what are you doing? And I was like, I know, it's a lot of work. Bear with me. What if we can try to get funding to help you on the organizational capacity side? You've heard from other folks today that we will not, fund organizational capacity, and that's not fair. So since 2021, we've been able to secure funding to help operationalize these nonprofits to do clean energy work and do decarbonization work. And we're really excited because these nonprofits are able to now secure their own funding and do this work on their own. So the initiative that we have presented today was really focused on this is great, but how can we do better? How can we ensure that this is open access? How do we ensure that local nonprofits are able to have this information without having to go through a conduit? So our paper was presented that we shared with CPC was how do we ensure that information on clean energy, just transition, decarbonization is open and accessible to everyone? Thank you.
So I believe we've had a pretty robust conversation, and one of the main themes that I've heard throughout is how do we create this ecosystem that creates equity in the inequities that often are plaguing the communities in which we find ourselves, and also, as we look at the racial wealth gap. And its main root cause of these inequities. Should housing be the only solution, or should there be a collaborative engagement of a multiplicity of solutions and the public sector and how they're involved? So just real quickly, one priority around creating this collaborative ecosystem of engagement that will address the inequities from your vantage point.
I go first? Yeah, so we mostly think about our work largely around public-private partnership, but in a way where the private side's not taking advantage of oversubsidy, but how are we a good steward of both our funds as well as the public funds? And then what is the right role for private and philanthropic capital to play alongside the public sector? And for us, that means a lot of trust from our funders, that they give us some freedom to invest as the markets changed. Like debt rates and loan to values changed a lot between 2021 and now, and we had to adjust our plans. So that was some would call it trust-based philanthropy, but giving us some control and funders giving up a little bit of control so we can really meet the needs of the market at the speed that the market moves at.
So I will say, I think there's a couple of things that we need to be mindful of. One, when we're talking about addressing inequity, traditionally underserved communities are not a monolith, and we need to make sure that we're creating solutions that speak to the different parts of those communities. So when we're talking about BIPOC developers, we've got some developers that are brand new to this space that have no idea about housing development, really do need the training, really do need intensive supports to get into this space. And then we've got other developers that understand of housing development, understand development space, and just need support to actually access capital and get to the next level. So the solutions that you develop for both sectors are going to be a little bit different, but they're both going to be addressing inequity. And so I think that there's a couple of things, aside from just making sure that we're recognizing that it's not a monolith, we really do need to ensure that we are looking at the whole ecosystem. It's not enough to just say, I've developed a new program to support BIPOC developers. You really have to understand, where does your program fit in? What gap is your program filling in the whole space? And I think oftentimes we're not taking the time to take a step back and look at all of the resources that are out there and where the gaps are, where people are falling through the cracks, and then tailoring our solutions to that specific gap, and understanding that we need others at the table filling the other gaps that are along the way, because we can't all do it alone, for that pathway to be seamless for folks. Yes, you plug this hole, but if they're going to fall down a couple of steps further, what impact are you having? So it does take bringing our public sector, state government, local government into the conversation. It does take bringing CDFIs and banks. It does take bringing foundations so that we have some flexibility about the types of solutions that we can deploy. And it takes talking to the folks that are actually going through the process so that they can really design and help figure out what that solution needs to look like, because we might have one vision of what they need, that might be very different from what they understand that they need or what they truly actually need. So I think those are a couple of things that we really need to be thinking about when we're talking about that ecosystem, and not just having a tunnel vision about what our role in that ecosystem is.
Yeah, so systemic systems or systemic design and racism is inherently oppressive. And when we started our organization, people are always like, you have a mission, you should be a nonprofit. We're like, hard stop. Like, we do this work because we care about our community, but part of the work is we want to ensure generational wealth. And so understanding what are the systems of oppression and how systems are designed, we've been able to support and uplift our local organizations through our MWBE status. And it sounds like a silly vehicle, but we understand that the community work and community mobilization and technical support, if it's under a corporation, people will take it seriously. But if it's under a 501c3, they're under a lot more scrutiny. There are a lot more questions, and where like there's an unconscious bias built into that decision making that we like to eliminate every time we move an organization forward. And so when we assess organizations, we're looking at it from an intersectional approach. We want to solve climate, but we're also looking to solve generational wealth issues. We're also looking to solve systemic injustice.
Let us thank our panelists. This conversation continues. Thank you all.